What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next, we are going to be going over the top comic sales from last week. Some really cool books in this one. We've got stuff going all the way from the modern age to the golden age. Let's check these out. Right. So before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So if you haven't watched one of these videos before, what I do is I watch the weekly Heritage comic auction. And this is an auction held obviously by Heritage, where every Sunday they sell Golden Age books, every Monday it's Silver Age, and every Tuesday it's Bronze through Modern. They sell all kinds of cool books. There's usually anything from books under $100 to books over $10, $20, $30,000 each week. So there's always a wide range of stuff. And what we're going to be talking about this week are those top sales. I picked 15 books. These are the top 15 books that sold in this auction. There's some surprises on the high side, a couple surprises on the low side, but overall, a pretty strong auction, especially at this top end. Now, let's check this out. So if you aren't familiar with this page here, this is the recap screen from that weekly Heritage auction. So you can see every book that sold, and I always like to go and check this out after the auction, and I typically order them from most expensive to least expensive. So I just get to see those really cool big books that sold, and that's what we're going to be talking about this week. Now, we can also see the auction total for this week. This gives you that perspective on how big each one of these weekly auctions are. This week, it was $497,787. Now, that might sound like a lot, but actually for one of the weekly auctions, this is on the little bit on the lower side. The last couple weeks, I've been seeing it up around 700,000. And it doesn't mean that it was a weak auction or anything. It just means that there weren't as many of those high dollar books in this auction. And that's actually something I noticed when I was going through and prepping for this auction before it actually happens. I go through and pick out all the books that I'm interested in watching. And there were a number of cool books in the Golden Age, but in the Silver, Bronze, Modern, there was less than what I'm used to seeing. Not as many big books this week. Doesn't necessarily mean anything. Just this week didn't have as much in that area. But we're going to start from number 15, go all the way up to number 1. And so here we are, number 15. And so this does give you an idea of how expensive some of these books are. This was the 15th most expensive book that sold in this auction, and it sold for $3,360. So there are some pretty expensive books that are part of this, and this is one of the hottest areas of comics right now. If you're not familiar with this, this is Cinderella Love, number 29. It is a Matt Baker cover. Actually, one of my favorite Matt Baker covers. I really like this one. I would have liked to have purchased this book, but man, this book just keeps getting more and more expensive. I had it going for $2,500, went for $3,360, beat my estimate by 34%. Matt Baker romance, especially on Heritage, just keeps going strong. There is a lot of demand there. If we go and check out GPA, you can see what I'm talking about. So we had a 1.5 sell in April of last year for 1,151. Here's this 2.5 sold for 3,360. A 4.5 sold a couple years ago for 5,520. Somebody appears to have stolen a 1.8 for $960 in January. That looks like an amazing buy based on these sales. But overall, this book and pretty much all Matt Baker romance, even the books that I would consider like non-keys, like this I would actually call like a key romance book. This is a very in-demand book for Matt Baker, but big sale. Like I said, my estimate was 2,500, beat it by 34%. All right, let's check out the next book. So this is one you don't see sell all that often. It's not really a big key or anything. It's just a number 1. And sometimes just being a number 1 for a pretty long run, especially going back into the Golden Age. We've got Superboy number 1, a 5.5. It was a White Pages copy. So that is going to add something to the value of the book. Now, this book had gotten very expensive at one point. It went for $5,040 as its peak sale. This was a $3,600 sale, but that still beat my estimate. I had it going for $2,900, so beat my estimate by 24%. If we go over to GPA again and we check out Superboy number 1, and we take a look at this book in a 5.5 just to get an idea where this has been. You can see here a 4.5 sold late last year for $2,300. We had a 6.5 go for 3,480 in May of last year. So this $3,600 sale, I mean, yeah, the white pages probably added something to it, but pretty strong sale for this book. We had a 2.5 that was also a very strong sale December last year, going for about $1,000 a point, $2,550. But still, regardless, I think this is a strong sale. It's a good looking book. Almost wouldn't be surprised if maybe there was a pop staple or something. If we take a look at the greater notes for this book a little bit, multiple chip out, full bottom of back cover. Okay, so back cover issue, multiple shadow cover, very light creasing to cover. So it looks like probably the issue is on the back. And yeah, I mean the back definitely for this book, front looks really, really nice. I mean, front of this book looks pretty good. I mean, this is a solid looking book. But the damage really seems to be more so on the back, and you can really see that here. And yeah, but I mean, if you've got a book and you want it to present well, damage on the back, damage on the spine, that kind of thing, that's really what's going to give you a book that presents as good as possible while being a little bit more affordable. But still, solid looking book. Went for $3,600. All right, now let's check out the next one. This one's cool. This is jumping all the way up into modern. Surprisingly large number of these, given it's a 9.9. This is Spawn #1, obviously just printed to death. Tons and tons and tons of copies of this out there, but it is still a 9.9 white pages. Spawn #1 went for $3,720. This one actually underperformed quite a bit from what I was expecting. Peak sale record for this book was $9,995. I had this going for 4,900, went for 3,720. This was the biggest underperformer that I saw in this auction. It went 24% below my estimate. Now in a 9.9, there are 69 copies. That's crazy. 69 9.9s, 6 higher. So 6 10.0s. So there are some very high grade copies of this book out there, especially just because there are so many on the census. If we go again, take a look at the CGC census, you can see here 25,054 universals, 33,000 total. This book was printed a lot and it was graded a lot, but still 9.9 is cool to see. Underperformer, but I mean, it's hard to say, was this a good buy? Let's take a look. I mean, the reality is there are enough of them that it does sell often enough in a 9.9 that you can actually really get a pretty good evaluation of the value of this book. And let's see where this was before the comic boom. So if we take a look at a 9.9 prior to the comic boom, I mean, yeah, in 2019, a $2,200 book. I mean, the comic boom was probably the start where this, $4,000 sale. So I could still see this dropping. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's too bad of a buy at 3,700, but I could see this book dropping a little bit more. But overall, it doesn't seem like it's too bad of a buy given the general trajectory of this book, popularity of McFarlane, all that kind of thing. So yeah, I would say it could maybe drop down to like 3,000, but not a bad pickup. All right, let's check out the next book here. And we've got another Golden Age romance book. This is one I had never seen before. It's a little bit smaller of a comic. This is Honeymoon Romance #1 from 1950, sold for $3,720 as well. Same as that Spawn. This one I had going for 2,700. This was not a record. Its prior record was 3,922, but still a very strong sale. Beat my estimate by 38%. I don't have a lot of detail on this one. It says digest size, paperback, and comic form. Overstreet lists it as rare. Not a book. Like I said, I've never seen this one sell before. I'm not overly familiar with this book. It looks like total on census, just 5 universals, and that's it. So not a book you're going to see come up for sale very often. Somebody decided they really wanted to pay for it. There was some competition and had what I feel was a pretty strong sale. All right, now let's move up to another modern book and another 9.9. This was Batman Vengeance of Bane #1, first appearance of Bane. 9.9 went for $3,840. Prior record was 5,768, so it's down from there. But I had it going for 3,600, so beat my estimate by 7%. I mean, that's pretty close. When you're within 10% on an auction, that's usually about as close as you can really hope to be. And so 3,840. Yeah, a little bit of an overperformance on this book. I mean, a strong sale, but still within range for what I was expecting for this book. Let's check out the census. There are 13 9.9s, none higher. So no 10.0s of this one, not like the Spawn #1, but still quite a few 9.9s out there for this book. Total census, 4,910 universals. So a lot, but not too many. No, not anywhere near that Spawn #1. Still, I think it's cool to see 9.9s come up for sale. I know there's definitely some contention out there about the 9.9, especially with the talk of the potential for a 9.9 pre-screen at some point in the future. But let's take a look at this one. It's got maybe a little bit of something up in that corner. I mean, it's got this little miswrap, so you really can't see much going on at the spine at all, and you shouldn't in reality. Bottom edge. This is where you see what's really different about 9.9s and 9.8s, 9.6s. It's often in the cut, the bindery cut at the edges, and this is basically perfect. And then we scroll along the bottom. I mean, yeah, let's see if anything jumps out. So far, I mean, it looks like a really incredible copy. I mean, this is probably on the case, these scuffs. I mean, I don't see anything except really this, like maybe a little bit of a bindery thing up in this corner. But yeah, I mean, the bottom corner looks great. All the edges, corners look basically perfect. So I can't argue with this 9.9. Pretty cool, to see two of them in this auction. All right, now let's check out the next book here. Now we're jumping all the way to the golden age. Got a pretty crazy cover here. We got Shield Wizard #8, a 4.5. Good looking book. You've got kind of like the World War II Nazi bondage, good girl art type cover. It's got a lot going on in it. This is from MLJ magazines. You can see here. That's what eventually became Archie Publications. But this one went for $3,840. I had it going for $3,600, so it beat my estimate by 7%. Very similar to the Vengeance of Bane. Now, this one, it had never sold in grade before, so it's a record by default. But it did also beat my estimate, which is, one of those things that I usually use to determine if that record is more meaningful or not. But you can see here, World War II bondage cover by Irv Novick. And it also has a frame portrait of Hitler on the cover. So let's see. That's one of the things, that for World War II collectors, they're often looking for covers that have those significant historical figures like Hitler, Hirohito, Mussolini, that kind of thing on the cover. And this one does in an image or in a portrait, a photo portrait. But yeah, beat my estimate by 7%. Solid sale for this book. All right, now this next one. I thought this one was pretty interesting because of how strong the sale was, being a raw book. This is Marvel Mystery Comics #8, estimated to be a VF copy. Went for $3,840. I had it going for $2,500. Beat my estimate by 54%. This is one of the biggest performers, strongest overperformers from what I was expecting in this auction. And this is an example where there are a lot of times where I see this, where books sell for as much or more than what I think they would graded when they're raw. I mean, that does happen, especially I see it on Instagram. I see it on Heritage. When people trust the seller, the person that's making that estimate of the grade, they get some pretty strong sales out there. And also, I want to comment on that with something that I've seen with there was a video I saw recently where somebody was saying, let's see, Marvel Mystery #80, where somebody was saying that one of the reasons that they thought comics were going to be dropping in price was the census. And this person, I can't remember the channel, sorry about that, but this person is an expert in cards. So they're an expert in cards and they were expanding into comics. And I felt like they were really approaching this from a mindset of cards, where with cards, it's a 10 or nothing in a lot of the cases. And so when it's a 10 or nothing, you have this huge price gap between raw and graded cards. Whereas with comics, you don't. I mean, this is proof of that. I mean, look at this. This is graded as a VF. If we go here and look at a VF, last VF sale from September of 2022, I mean, peak comic boom, $3,200. So it went for $3,840. We look at a 7.5 just this year, sold for $2,880. Again, $3,840. So that's the big difference between comics and cards, or one of the big differences, is that with comics, there is a much smaller gap, or almost in many cases, a non existent uh, gap. And in this case, I think the person paid more for this raw than they would have graded, maybe because they're like, maybe I can get an 8.5. So I think that this person actually paid more than what this book would be worth graded if it came back an 8.0. And that's one of those big differences between comics and cards, is that with grading, outside of ultra moderns, where ultra moderns are 9.8s or nothing. They're very similar to cards, where it's a PSA 10 or a SGC 10 or whatever, or nothing. With comics, that is not the case. If you go to, like, I think I commented on that video where I said, if you go to Heritage like this, you go to a Comic Con, you go to an Instagram live sale, wherever it is, you go to a comic shop where the books are on their walls. I mean, the prices that they have up there are very similar to graded prices. You don't have that huge gap. In reality, I don't think that gap should be there. I feel like there should be some gap for the added value of grading, where somebody is checking for restoration, that kind of thing, completeness. You get a little bit more confidence with the books that you're buying, but it shouldn't be multiples, that are added. But yeah, this is just one of those examples that really proves this. I mean, let's take a close look at it, see if maybe we think it could do better than, an 8.0. I mean, we're going down the spine. There's a little bit of tanning on this book, but spine looks really nice on this copy. A little roughness in that corner, a little roughness in this corner. We're gonna have to take a look at the back cover of this book, because, yeah, offhand, looks like a pretty nice book from the front. I would grade it above a VF, at least on the front of the book. Let's take a look at the back. If we look at the back here, what we're really going to be looking for, maybe if there's any creases or anything. Again, just a little bit of kind of like tanning on the edge. There's a dust shadow on the bottom here. This looks like it's going to be the main thing. This is definitely there's some creasing in this corner down here. Until I got to that corner, I was like, oh man, maybe this is better than a 9. But with that creasing in that corner, I'd say it's solidly an 8, maybe even an 8.5. I don't think it's going to get to a 9. It does look like there are multiple creases here. I don't think it's getting to a 9 with that, but it is a good looking book. I would say solidly an 8, maybe an 8.5. I mean, who knows what someone might get on it, but yeah, I still, you can see here that this was a book that someone paid expecting they're going to get more than an 8 probably on this, and hopefully they're hoping for an 8.5, maybe a 9. But yeah, just a perfect example of where graded and ungraded, the gap just isn't there on a book like this. All right, now let's talk about the next book here. This is one that's actually multiple books. I thought this one was pretty cool. I talked about this with a sale maybe a week or two ago. It was my most surprising high sale of the week. And this is another bound volume. If you're not familiar with bound volumes, it's where somebody would take multiple comics, group them together, and put them inside of like a hardcover bound volume. They'd have somebody make that. Now, this was actually from the publisher, I believe. Yeah, so it's file copies of issues 1 through 57. So 57 issues of Wilbur, all bound into a set of 10 hardcover volumes. So effectively, each volume somebody paid $660. But when you look at Wilbur, those books don't tend to sell for quite as much as Archie, and these were all trimmed. And so it says that in here. That's one of the things you always want to check with bound volumes. These were all trimmed, but there are nice copies. Like I said, file copies. They're in nice condition. Now, for these, I had it estimated as going for $4,200. This went for 54% over my estimate, but still not like a really shocking sale for this one, just because, I mean, 10 file copy bound volumes. I mean, it's a pretty unique item. Nobody is I don't expect anybody is breaking up this set. They're going to keep this as these bound volumes. Now, one thing, just if anybody from Heritage is watching this video, I would like it if you actually showed one of the covers for the bound volume, or the spine, just so we could see it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And I think it adds a lot to the listing, just because they didn't on this one. I think that would have been nice, nice to be able to see. But still, pretty cool to see these bound volumes come up. People are definitely paying big premiums for them. I had thought if these were just the books, that this would go for something like $2,800. Then I added 50% for this being this bound file copies of these books, and it went for even about 50% more than that. So this was a strong sale in my opinion. All right, next one. This is a favorite for many people for LB Cole. It's one of the classic sci-fi covers from him. This is Captain Flight Comics number 11, a 5.0. I had this one going for 6,500. Its prior record, because it hadn't sold in a while, was 541. It crushed that, and it beat my estimate by 2%, 6,600. So it was pretty much right in line with what I was expecting. But cool sci-fi cover for LB Cole. If you like sci-fi, if you like LB Cole, this to me is the book to get. He also has that Contact Comics, which actually sold in this one as well. I don't care for that cover. We'll talk about that one. I think that one, just the level of detail and just the skill that seems in that cover is not, it's not what I really think deserves the price for it. But that's my personal opinion. We'll talk about that, like I said, when we get there. But I do like this one. I think it's a pretty cool cover. It's still not, it doesn't stand up to me for Zeta sci-fi covers, but still pretty cool. And it's quite a bit earlier, 1947. All right, next one here. We've got another MLJ. We have Hangman Comics number 3. This is a pretty wild cover. I mean, when you look at, I mean, not just this Nazi villain guy with the axe who's trying to hit Hangman in the back with that axe. You've got some crazy stuff in the background too. You've got this woman who's in this tube in the back here, but these 3 maybe women or an alien or something like that in these tubes back here that are already dead or look like they're probably already dead. So I mean, just a pretty crazy cover. You've got the kind of like this racist Japanese trope in the background. You've got the Nazi soldier in the front. I mean, just a lot going on this cover. Now, I had this one going for $6,500. Its prior record was 2,600. Went for 8,400. This was a big sale. This was a strong sale in my opinion. Let's go check that one out on GPA. We've got Hangman number 3. And not a book that's going to sell all that often. I mean, a pretty rare book. And you can see here, there was a 0.5 missing the back cover, went for $845. Let's check out that last sale. The last sale for this one was 7 years ago. That was 2,600. And I mean, it's more than tripled since then. I mean, not too bad. We had a 9.0 Pennsylvania pedigree go for 37,000 last year, but I feel like this is a pretty strong sale. Not shocking, I guess. Like it's one of those that doesn't sell very often. It's pretty rare. People want it. There's gonna be a bidding war for it, and that's what happened here. Went for a pretty big number, but cool cover. A lot going on it. Definitely has pretty much everything you're looking for in a World War II era cover. All right, now we've got that Contact Comics. This is Contact Comics number 12. And this was a 6.0 that went for $8,400. I actually had it going for $8,400, so it went for exactly what I thought it would. But I mean, this one, it feels like a kid drew it. Like I know some people love this cover, but this one, it has kind of like an Art Deco look. Like that's what I always picture with this. But this one just doesn't do anything for me. I mean, personally, like this feels like if I was like, I used to doodle like spaceships, when I was a kid. This feels like what I would have drawn. I was like, this is the spaceship I would have drawn, as a kid, doodling on a sheet of paper. Like there's nothing technically proficient to me about this cover. It just does not appeal to me. That is my opinion on it. And I'm sure I will upset some people with that opinion. But if you jump back to like this Captain Flight, which was 1 year later, like it's a lot more skill to me in this one. A lot more skill in the spaceship. Looks just a more interesting spaceship. The detail that's in this, like these plants on the cover, these aliens, the people, just everything about this cover to me is vastly superior to this cover. Like this one doesn't do it for me. I mean, 6.0, $8,400. I know it goes for a lot. I know it's always going to go for a lot when it comes up for sale, but it is just not one that appeals to me visually. All right, now jump into the Silver Age. Got a big Silver Age key here. An X-Men #1, a 4.0, went for 9,300. I had it going for 9,500. Its record during the comic boom was 24,000. So definitely has come back from there, cut by more than half. But like I said, I had it going for 9,500, was within 2% of what I thought it would go for. So no big surprises here with this book. Colors aren't great on this copy. I mean, yeah, it has the lighter green corner box. I've talked about that. Anytime I talk about this book, I talk about it. You can have the dark green corner box, you can have the light green corner box. But this feels like it's maybe a little sun faded too. It just the reds are really light on this cover. Just it does feel like this is a little bit of a sun faded copy as well. But went for around what I thought, $9,300. Let's check that one out. Let's just see where that is versus where this book has been, just to see if is it time to start looking at X-Men #1. I feel like I've talked about it a few times that I feel like this book is probably still coming down. But if we go down to a 4.0, yeah, I mean, I think it still seems elevated. I mean, we look at prior to the comic boom. I mean, let's look at 2019. This book in 2019 looks like 5,500 to 6,200, somewhere in that range, about a $6,000 book. It's a big key. I would generally expect it to creep up a little bit every year. So maybe it would be around a $7,500 book today. This one isn't an especially great presenting 4.0. And like I said, it doesn't have any pieces missing or anything, but it's just the colors aren't real great. I think this book could still drop. I would see this book still dropping over time. I do think that this one still has a little ways to go. I wouldn't be rushing out. In other words, what I mean is I wouldn't be rushing out to buy this. Now, I had somebody comment on a prior video when I was talking about kind of like estimated prices versus where I think they're going to go. Just because I think this book might be around a $7,500 book doesn't mean that's where I think it's going to sell today. That's where I think maybe a year from now, maybe it continues to drop, and before it starts to turn back up, it's going to get down to 7,500. That's more or less what I'm talking about there. But yeah, I think that this book could still continue to drop. All right, now for #3, I had somebody actually in a comment ask about this book as well. This was Adventure Comics 247, a 7.0. This is actually a pretty big key, very expensive book, as you can see. First appearance of the Legion of Superheroes, Lightning Boy, Saturn Girl, and Cosmic Boy. So 7.0 went for $9,600. This was a new record. A new record for a Silver Age book. We haven't had that happen very often. Prior record was 9,000. I had it going for 8,500. And now in that comment, there was somebody that had responded to that, and they said they were. I think they said, well, it's going to go for at least more than 8,700 because it was sitting at 8,700 at that time. And so when I'm doing an estimate, I'm not basing my estimate based on, like, say I look at it and the price is already above that. I mean, that to me just means I think the person paid more than what I felt it was worth at that moment. So my estimate, 8,500, is what I think the value of that book is at that moment. If somebody pays more than that, it means I think they paid more than what it's worth. Now, does that mean that it could eventually trend up, that the book will eventually reach that value? Possibly. But it also means that I think if this person then took this book and immediately tried to sell it, they probably wouldn't be able to get $9,600 for it. That's how I am viewing that pricing. Really strong sale and a record. And yeah, just we haven't seen Silver Age records very much lately. So I think that's really notable that this one was actually a record in grade. All right, now for #2, we had Fantastic Four #48 in a 9.4. This was a strong sale too. Now, not even close to the record. Record for this book during the comic boom was $31,200. I had this going for 11,500, went for 13,200, beat my estimate by 15%. I mean, strong sale. I mean, is this because of the news lately about Fantastic Four, the possibility that it's going to be Silver Surfer and Galactus as the villains? Who knows? I mean, I'm not betting anything on the MCU right now. I mean, the MCU has been, outside of the expectation for Deadpool and Wolverine. I mean, the MCU has been not great over the last few years. And so I don't have any confidence in what they're putting out until I actually see the movie and actually, if I think it's good. But strong sale for this book. Let's go check this one out. We have Fantastic Four, number 48. That first appearance of Silver Surfer, first cameo appearance of Galactus, and we had this 9.4. So 9.4 here, and you can see it's a little bit of an uptick for this book, but it had been just on this general downtrend, and this wasn't like a white pages copy or anything like that, off white to white pages. But then let's look at what other grades have been doing. When you look at other grades, like let's look at a 9.0. I mean, just they've just gradually still been trending down. You get these, you get sales where they jump up. I mean, comics aren't a perfect market. They aren't like stocks where you're selling thousands or millions of shares per day. You're selling one every few months, maybe, up in these types of grades. Then let's take a look at an 8.0. 8.0, just it feels like this book to me in general is still trending down. A couple little upticks lately. I mean, like I said, this could be from that news, like just a little bit of hype on the book. And but across the board, you can see a lot of these red arrows. But yeah, I mean, look at this at the end here, these little upticks. So I mean, news does impact the prices of these books, and it could be just a little bit of hype, a few extra bidders, and we get some stronger sales for this. I mean, we did have this book I talked about, this 9.8, that was a really strong 9.8 sale, in my opinion, that happened in January, where generally things have been trending down, and this one was kind of stayed flat, which I was not expecting. So it could be that this news has been, pumping this book up a little bit, but strong sale, beat my estimate by 15%. All right, now the last one here, actually closing out with a weak sale, in my opinion. Amazing Fantasy, number 15, a 2.5. I had this going for $24,000. Prior record was $45,550. Just the craziness during the comic boom. Went for $21,600, 10% below my estimate. I mean, the only thing you can really say, I mean, it's a 2.5. You're going to expect flaws. The only thing that's a little bit of a deterrent on this book at a 2.5 is the color strike on Spider-Man isn't great. It may be a little bit of fading. You can see that it's a little darker here, kind of in his chest, and a little lighter around his arms and his face and at his feet. But overall, for a 2.5, it's a pretty good looking book. I mean, you don't really have any chipping. I mean, you've got wear along the edges, but again, it's a 2.5. But you don't really have any chipping or anything. There's like a tear right here. But in general, a solid looking 2.5, went for 21,600. I have to say that's a good buy. I mean, with what I've seen with Amazing Fantasy 15 over the last maybe 6 months, 8 months, this book really does feel like it's generally found its floor. And so if you can buy one under what I would perceive as the market, which I think for a 2.5 is about $24,000 right now, I think this is a good buy. So that's all I can really say about it. First appearance of Spider-Man, 21,600 for 2.5. I do think that this was a good pickup. All right, so those were all the books. As you can see there were some high sales, there were some low sales. On average, though, at this upper end at least, the more expensive books, this was a pretty strong set of books in this top 15. Only two that really disappointed. We had the Spawn number 1, the 9.9, that went 24% below my estimate, and the Amazing Fantasy 15 that went 10% below. Other than that, I mean, there was the X-Men 1 that was 2% low, but that's really as close as you can hope to get. So really only two notable underperformers. And I think the Amazing Fantasy 15 was a good buy. But hopefully you enjoyed this video, saw some cool books, maybe helped you out with pricing on maybe one of these books that you're looking to pick up. If you did, please hit that like button, subscribe button, notification bell, all that kind of stuff. I got more videos over here. If you'd like to watch some of my other videos, subscription button is right here. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, I'd really appreciate it. And I will see you in the next video.